Thank you very much, Geisha. I'm very, very pleased to be here. Can you please remember to turn off your cell phones, to send any questions on the hashtag, because that seemed to work quite well in the last panel. So I will try and keep an eye on the hashtag as the debate goes on, in case you think that they're questions that you want to hear from our panelists. And this panel is going to last for about 1 hour as well. And there's no Q&A, just the hashtag for questions. So disinformation, misinformation, they're often very unsophisticated. I mean, a lot of the work that I'm doing as a journalist is involved in just old images being relabeled and shared massively, represented as something else. But powerful algorithms and AI already giving that kind of propaganda, conspiracy theories, a very wide influence online. And techniques, not just to falsify images, but also videos, are getting increasingly sophisticated, even if they're not yet at a level where they're completely believable. And for example, we'll be discussing a little bit where we're at so far with deepfakes that we're starting to talk about a lot now. And that started, as you probably know, on Reddit with videos, pornographic videos of women's faces being stuck onto videos, swapped with porn actors, and now being discussed very seriously as potential security threats, national security threats. So our three panelists are very well placed to discuss some of these tools and techniques being used to push disinformation now and in the future. We have Guillaume Chaslot, who was a former engineer at YouTube. He also worked at Google, and he set up a company called AlGo Transparency to observe how the algorithm at YouTube is functioning. Alexandre Alaphilippe, the executive director of the EU DisinfoLab in Brussels, that some of you may know, and Dr. Vidya Narayanan, did I get it right?
Narayanan, yeah.
Narayanan, who is a researcher of computational propaganda at Oxford, at the Oxford
Internet Institute.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us. I want to start with Guillaume, and if you could give us a little bit more information about how AlGo Transparency works and why you set it up.
Yeah, so the YouTube recommendation algorithm generates more than 70% of the views. So it's really important to see what it's doing. And in terms of disinformation, does it favor disinformation or not? So I started kind of reverse engineering the algorithm, creating bots that look what the algorithm is doing, which content it's pushing forward. And for the last 2 years, I've seen that it promotes more disinformation, and in particular, conspiracy theories. Why is that? Because these conspiracy theories, they keep users online watching for a long time. And the algorithm is optimized to keep the user watching for a long time. From the point of view of the algorithm, conspiracy theory is a jackpot. So often I saw the algorithm that I worked on recommending these conspiracies from many channels to try to get as many people as possible believing in these conspiracies because they watch more YouTube. So we need to observe that. So I've pushed towards that. And finally, Google took action last month and said they will start to decrease the number of recommendations.
Right, there was an announcement at the end of January, right, where they said that they would, in some, I mean, it didn't sound, they would recommend fewer videos that could misinform users in harmful ways. I mean, that sounds like an achievement in terms of the work you've been doing to make it much more transparent, the way that the algorithm is working. But in terms of results, you said you've already had a look using your tool to see how there's been a change since that announcement from.
So you can go on algotransparency.org and you can see, like, since the announcement, the number of conspiracy theories that gets recommended by many channels have significantly decreased. Mm-hmm. So it's going slowly. So they said it will take time to get in full effect. So, but we already seen a significant decrease of the most crazy conspiracy theories.
Can you give a few more examples of those kind of? I mean, people are very familiar with conspiracy theories about the Earth being flat, or there's been a lot of media coverage about the kind of conspiracy theories that are being pushed very far on YouTube. But can you just give a few more examples of the kind of conspiracy theories that you saw and that made you want to try and make it more transparent about how the algorithm was working, and then how that has changed?
Yeah, so one of my favorite examples is the flat Earth conspiracy theories, because it's like so out there that it's clear to everybody that there is a problem, and it was recommended by the algorithm hundreds of millions of times. So it was huge until like end of last year, and now finally we see less of this. There were a lot of different conspiracy theories, like between aliens and giant walking on Earth in the past. So they put like a fake picture of a giant skeleton, and then people click. I would click. It's natural, but that started to decrease. But I don't think the more conspiracies will come, but they will be less obvious.
You think there'll be more conspiracies? In what way? Are you seeing that already with the?
Not yet, but I mean the algorithm didn't change. So the algorithm is still favoring content that keeps user watching a long time. So anything that keeps user watching is going, and conspiracies are really good for that. So if you have like something that is less obvious, so for instance, recently I saw some title of videos that were just, scientists, those scientific evidence about the pyramids are debated, and so that this kind of hooking you up, so it's not clearly a conspiracy, but then when you watch the video, you realize that it's heading towards conspiracies.
So you're saying that it's not really having a significant impact. It's a step in the right direction, because it's a recognition of the fact that it is a problem, that they're recommendation algorithms. But in terms of what's changing, it's not yet really very significant.
We see some good results, but in the long term, I doubt it will be the ultimate solution.
Mm-hmm. And can you just give it just to explain a little bit more clearly how AlGo Transparency works, and how it's a tool? I mean, I think one of the solutions that we've been talking about, and that I've heard in the first panel, was about giving tools to the public, explaining things in a very transparent way, and helping the public understand clearly what's happening, and preparing tools that people can use, that anyone can use, not just people who are very well versed in OS techniques. And how exactly does AlGo Transparency work? And if someone wants to go and have a look and see what's happening on YouTube, how would that work?
So basically, I start with 1,000 channels, information channels, everything from Russia Today, Fox News, CNN, etc. 1,000 of this channel. Then I follow recommendations, and I see which videos were the most recommended from all these channels. And so you can see around 4,000 videos on the number of channels that recommended this video. So basically, the idea is if something goes wrong, if there is some propaganda, if there are some fake clicks, if there is something that tries to influence the algorithm, then the algorithm will start recommending this video from many channels. So, so it creates a list of videos that are either extremely popular, or that are either extremely biased or extremely gamed.
And so by using the tool, it means that you can see how the algorithm is working on a neutral account.
Exactly. So you can see in which direction, towards which videos YouTube is pushing users.
Okay. I think we'll come back to that, but I just want to talking about all the different ways that that algorithms are pushing content. Vidya, your research on computational propaganda has focused a lot on different elections in number of countries, not just the UK and Brexit and the US, but also more recent elections and recent research on WhatsApp in Brazil.
That's correct.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what you've seen in your research as the impact of AI in spreading false news around elections?
Sure. Thank you, Sophie. I'm the Director of Research at the Computational Propaganda Project at Oxford University. I'm part of the Oxford Internet Institute. Within the Computational Propaganda Project, one of our, we focus on tracking elections. And when we say tracking elections, we mean identifying sources of misinformation, disinformation that might be circulating on different social media platforms that are related to these events. So we have developed a grounded typology to classify sources of misinformation, and some of the characteristics are we identify professional news sources and differentiate them from what we call junk news sources or polarizing content. And we have 5 main criteria to classify a news source as spreading propaganda or as a junk news source. And these are professionalism, style, credibility, bias, counterfeit. And if a source ticks 3 of these 5 criteria, then it's classified as a junk news source. So very briefly, professionalism is about observing best practices and standards of journalism, providing info about real authors, and being transparent and accountable. Style, some of these junk news outlets, they use emotionally driven language, misleading headlines, excessive capitalization, and so on. Credibility is an issue. Bias, it could be hyperpartisan, ideologically skewed. Some outlets are classified as counterfeit, so they deliberately use branding of more reputed news organizations in an effort to deceive audiences and so on. So, as Sophie mentioned, we have tracked elections in the US, UK, Germany, France, and Sweden. And we've identified that during the US presidential elections, the ratio of number of professional news sources to the number of junk news sources was 1:1, which meant audiences on social media, principally on Twitter, were exposed for every piece of professional news that they saw. They also saw a junk news source. They were exposed to a junk news source. And the ratio was 1:4 in the UK elections back in 2017, 1:4 in the German parliamentary elections, slightly better in France, 1:7. And we studied Swedish elections recently, and the ratio was 1:3. And the story is not so much about Russian interference, particularly in Sweden. It's more about homegrown sources of junk news, which is a matter of concern. And so when you move away from studying countries in Western Europe and the US, you begin to notice a pattern that actors who want to push propaganda on social media networks to gain political mileage are no longer pointing to sources of authority. It might be dubious sources, but that's no longer a requirement. So it's definitely shifted to more user-generated content, particularly on messaging platforms, encrypted messaging platforms like WhatsApp. So audience group seems to react positively to the fact that they seem to be bypassing traditional media gatekeepers. At least that's how it's projected. That's the narrative, that this is the real truth. It's completely user-generated, and there's no attempt to point to any source of authority, but it seems to have a power of its own because it's projected as bypassing traditional media keepers who've always been biased against a particular group, and now the power is being transferred to them, and there are voices that speak in the same language, etc. And this narrative is reinforced by influential politicians or celebrities. So when we study elections in Brazil and now in India, the election campaign in India, I think the predominant feature is that it's no longer about junk news sources or news sources as the term is traditionally understood, but more user-generated content in the form of polarizing memes, photos, videos. And in fact, in the Brazilian elections, we found that there were a number of links on WhatsApp to YouTube videos. So this could be a tactic of directing users on one platform to another platform, where, of course, then the recommendation algorithm takes over and they're exposed to more similar content. Yeah, I mean, it seems to give audiences a special sense of power, and the idea that they have been shut out of political discourse is reinforced over and over again through these through this type of content. And that's a real challenge because we don't have the techniques yet to sift through this content and separate what's true from false, fact from fiction. And if I may be permitted to quote an example, so you might be aware that India recently launched an airstrike against Pakistan. And even before, Pakistan did end up capturing one of India's pilots. And even before the Indian Defense Ministry could put out a statement, we were beginning to see photographs of this pilot on Twitter and other social media platforms. And for a few hours, it seemed as though Twitter handles from both sides of the border would actually push these two countries to the brink of war. And that was a defining moment for me. Even, I mean, although we are very familiar with how social media works and so on, we could see the momentum building in real time through an exchange of these photographs and comments. Without, Daniel Kimmich spoke about this information vacuum, so it was being rapidly filled by rumors and false images and videos. There was even a video of claiming to be of the actual airstrike. And this was something new. I mean, even the fact that a military intervention could be discussed threadbare and audience groups couldn't separate from what was official, what was false, and what was deliberately misleading is a matter of huge concern, I think.
But so that in that respect, it was more the danger of the human beings. It was the interactions between human beings.
It was.
Not even talking about extension of...
That's correct. So these were just... it wasn't even very sophisticated misinformation. It was because tensions were already running high, but there were people who were using this to maybe push up their television ratings. They wanted to gain political mileage. So it was all happening. And yeah, this was just with very simple sort of imagery and so on. So no AI so far. And I am a computer scientist myself, and I'm interested in reinforcement learning and machine learning techniques and so on. So we're seeing the rapid development, I should say, of generated techniques or generative methods. So these techniques are used to generate new data out of existing data sets using these sophisticated advanced AI techniques. So I mean, there is a real possibility that we would see high-quality images that are entirely generated by networks and computer systems that you cannot identify as fake using, reverse search, reverse image search techniques and so on, because they're not Photoshop. They are genuine images, but it's just not of real events or real people. So, I mean, we are entering an era where this technology has the potential to alter the perception of reality for different audience groups, particularly for vulnerable communities where media literacy is already low, combined with a lack of technical awareness that there is this technology out there that could generate realistic images. And they are images by definition, except that they're not of real people or events.
And in terms of your research, have you seen examples of that yet? Being
no, not yet. So we source our content by using politically relevant hashtags, and we have looked through this data, and we haven't seen any data that any images that have been generated. Sure, photoshopped images, fake videos, and so on, but not generated media yet.
And how soon, how close do you think we are to that in terms of the quality of what is being created? And
so I think that is one of the big challenges, because we have to study the state of the art. It's again in the hands of few private corporations. Computer scientists are leading this effort, and of course their intention is not to create, not to disrupt democratic processes or flood social media with generated images and videos that would distort reality. But technology is a double-edged sword, and their intention is to endow computer systems with the ability to make sense of the world, to learn by experience, just as we do. But in the process, you have these images being created, and it's for us to study what impact it would have. So to answer your question, I don't yet know, but this is something that we're actively engaged in.
Mm-hmm. Alexandre, Alaphilippe, you've just prepared a study at the EU DisinfoLab, quite a broad study looking at the state of online misinformation now and in looking to the future as well. In terms of AI and I mean, what we've been discussing here, what have you seen in that study in terms of what currently exists and what is a very near threat in terms of misinformation that is being created? And perhaps also the use of AI in terms of tackling that as well.
Yeah, we just conducted a study for the European Parliament on the challenges around AI and disinformation. And when you look at the title of the session, I think it's very interesting because we have algorithms, AI, and deepfakes. And as Ambassador Fried says a lot, we need to unpack the problems to understand what are the different things that are at stake. So when we talk about these, if we look at algorithm, we're talking about what Guillaume said about content distribution, so how the content is distributed to people. And that's, for the moment, one of the major concerns that we have. Why? Because unfortunately, we are at a time where we have more and more distrust towards institutions, and institutions from civil society in open democracies. And that's a very dangerous way, because we are reaching a point when we don't trust the people we used to trust before, whether they are the public powers, the journalists, the academics, the companies. We don't trust anyone anymore. And when we live in this distrust era, the fact that you have algorithms that can recommend content on a bias that you don't know is very frightening, because you have the impression that you're following a path, and you have the impression that everyone is following the same path than you, but you don't. You have a path that has been designed for you. And we have to say it, this path has been designed in an economical context. Platforms have been created not to be the official non-for-profit public square for everyone. They've been created for people to share content and to be able to make money out of it. So that's a thing we need to take into account. That doesn't mean it's evil. It means that we need to understand this, and we need to exactly know how and why we have this, because the problem is not the technology. Technology at the very beginning is neutral. It's basically, I want people to see more content. The thing is, how you are playing with this, it has a lot of impact. Guillaume showed it on YouTube, and we have also very strong concern about how Facebook algorithm is pushing strong links recommendation to people that is preventing them to have access to, sometimes to a reliable source of information, because you see more content from your family than content from media pages, for instance, and that's a concern. So I think the first thing around here is to understand that we have this kind of issue with content distribution, which is very difficult to solve, because the minor change we the platforms can make the algorithm the biggest change it can have, because these platforms are reaching 1 billion, 2 billion, 4 billion people at the same time. So the work for this is to be able for civil society to understand what's going on. And I think what Guillaume is showing is like being vocal and talk and explain how this is going on can help to improve things. So we need to keep this doing up. Claudio D'Agosto, a researcher, Italian researcher based in Berlin, is doing now a study on how the Facebook newsfeed is reacting to some kind of profiles. So basically how you serve media content depending on your profile that you have on Facebook. And that's very interesting to know how it works, because it helps us to understand what are the results of the bias, because bias are inevitable in that, because we are humans. Then if we look at AI, AI is the capacity now to amplify automatically, and I think that's what was said in the previous session on bots, the capacity to learn about how to amplify automatically and using sock puppet accounts and that kind of things. That's an issue because it's very much complicated. We come from a space where you had robots that are able to tweet 24 hours a day, 400 messages a day, 4,000 messages a day sometimes, and you can see that this is basically non-human. But in this field, you always have to think as a bad actor. Because if you do think as, I'm searching for something, you might find something, but that's not what there is. You have to think as a bad actor. If I want to hide, and I want to use AI, I'm going to design a program that is not acting like a robot. So I'm going to show a program how a human is behaving, and I'm going to say to the programs, like, look how they behave, and behave the same. And if you want to look at the pictures, as Vidya just said, now you have websites when you can just create random images of people. Do you know thisperson.com is a very good website for this. You hit refresh, and you have a new face every time of someone who does not exist. And if you're a little bit smart, you go into, on the web, even not on the dark web, you look at leak of information on how people, where they live, do they have a digital life or not, and you can create everything very easily. So it's very easy to create 200 false accounts, 200 false pictures with real names, and then it's very difficult to understand what's going on. So, but AI is opening a new field of research now. The study that was conducted and published last week from Gordon Ramsay's team at King's College on understanding how content can be replicated in different websites at the same time or in a very short amount of time is very interesting, because at some point it means that you have exactly the same content published in many sources of information, and the fact that how rapid it is to be copy-pasted, how what kind of organization you have between these websites, this is the kind of thing which is interesting. So I think AI is opening a new field for research on this, and to understand the kind of patterns that are around, and to understand this a little bit better. But I think and we have deepfakes. There are many videos around deepfakes now. There is, I think, a little bit of hype around deepfakes now. I don't say that this is not important. I say we have a hype on this right now. I think this will be the problem in the next 5 years. Maybe we'll have problem in the next 5 weeks. So let's keep in touch, and let's keep in mind that this problem is a problem, but it's not the real problem for now. But we need to prepare for this, for sure. But more than the deepfakes, for me, is what I call the lockdown syndrome problem, is that we have people that are having less and less trust with each other, and they are stuck into these filter bubbles, and they have no access to this. And we need to understand that algorithms between platforms, they talk to each other. They don't talk to each other because someone at Google is going, someone at Twitter is going somewhere at Facebook and saying like, oh, you should do this. No, because we have a vast amount of traffic which is going online. When we open our browser, the fact that every web page that is going into our browser to show information and advertisement is sending data to a lot of advertisement centers. And they have a lot of things, and they know this. And all of these data centers, they can talk to each other to provide you the best content for you. And I think this tailorship of information, which is mainly driven first by economical gain, and then by making the web a better place to discuss. I think that's the thing we need to understand.
Is it, sorry to interrupt, but is it part of the problem as well, is that we're trying to keep up with the AI and where it's going, and that we're trying to keep up with studying how it's interacting? It's always a catch-up, a game of catch-up in terms of, I mean, I don't know, video or Alexandre, is that what we're saying or not?
Yeah, I guess, you could describe it as a game of catch-up, whack-a-mole, etc. But of course, I think you need to understand that it's a combination of several different problems. I mean, there are divisions in society. There is no getting away from that. So, we need to consider if social media is merely a mirror to society. Is it actually causing these divisions, or is it just deepening the fault lines? Are there special affordances that facilitates or that naturally leads to these fault lines being, to drawing people apart rather than bringing them closer? And AI itself is a very, very broad term encompassing many, many different, I think, technical problems as well as solutions. So yes, I mean, we are playing catch-up because, there are corporations that have invested billions of dollars in, in improving these techniques. And, and it's almost, even the researchers themselves, I think, have limited capacity to explain exactly what some of these algorithms can do. So in that sense, I guess it is a game of catch-up, but...
But it doesn't have to be a game of catch-up. So now the algorithm is made to optimize how long people spend online. So basically the vision of reality that will be amplified by the algorithm the most is a vision that keeps users the longest and makes the most money for Google eventually. So
exactly.
It shouldn't be like that. Google could totally put a version of truth, whether it's crowdfunded, whether it's like expert-based, etc. It could, I would prefer crowdfunded, but they could totally do that. And the problem is that it would decrease the amount of time that people spend online.
Sure.
So to show one of the terrible examples that we saw like 2 weeks ago, there were some YouTubers discovered a network of pedophile videos, and people wonder because they were just like little girls doing gymnastics, but they were viewed millions of times by pedophiles. People wonder what is going on. This is just very innocent videos. And what's happening is that these pedophiles spend a tremendous amount of time on YouTube. So basically, the algorithm is recommending the videos that are the most likely to awake pedophilic instinct to the people who are the most likely to be awakened by these videos. So this, by design, is broken. So we need to rethink at the AI level, so we don't have to play catch-up anymore.
I agree. I think, the corporations have to put their money where their mouth is, and I think redesign their business model and AI systems.
I think we talk a lot in the past 15 years. We've been talking a lot on the economical value of API and platform, which is great because we managed to do that crazy things with technology and platforms. I think now is the time to talk about democratic value of APIs. What is this bringing to our society? And I think these solutions are, these techniques, this technology is very complex. And I think what we need deep in civil society is a understanding of how does it work? And when I say in civil society, like from schools to politicians. Because right now there is very few understanding of what is AI around politicians and what it can solve and what it cannot solve. So I think this is one of the main thing to do. And also we need to not let's say log this into a computer science perspective, because this has social impacts, and we need to put social researchers on board on this. I think that's one of the crucial things. Social researchers are not enough on board on disinformation issues. That's because we don't know them, so maybe they are in the room. There were some yesterday. We need to have more of them on board, from psychology, from social science, because we cannot solve this with only technical and code problems. Yeah. Code is having social impact. And if we're talking about how we make a society together and how we live society together, it's not code that bringing us together. No. Code is helping, but it's how we are defining our relationship together as humans and how code can help on this.
Yeah.
So by building more tools like AlGo Transparency that takes the data that is generated by this algorithm and give it in the hands of everybody and social scientists, we can start to build a shared reality together, see what's actually happening right now.
Mm-hmm. We're coming back to the theme of collaboration much more widely, not just between different countries, between different research areas.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the Oxford Internet Institute was set up precisely to address some of these issues. So we are a bunch of political scientists, social scientists, psychologists, philosophers, lawyers, computer scientists who want to study the impact of internet on society. So there are groups within the Oxford Internet Institute that are looking at bias, algorithmic accountability, ourselves, who are mapping the landscape of misinformation, disinformation, and and recommender algorithms, how they're designed to perpetuate certain types of bad behavior patterns and so on. So I think there are efforts underway already to tackle this in a collaborative manner. But I think our tribe should increase, and there should be more such collaborations and more interest from funders to support this.
And in terms of scaling up these kind of operations that are still very small in some respects, faced with the size of technology companies, the money that's behind propaganda campaigns, I mean, now it's starting to be something that we're discussing a little bit more in a general way, because we have some journalists who are left who are studying algorithms and trying to explain what is happening behind the scenes in these kind of misinformation campaigns. What else can we do to scale up these efforts? I mean, is there technology that can help us as well in the scaling up of efforts to tackle the misinformation? Alexandre?
Yes, but I think we can, the real thing that we need to do is we need to empower ourselves on this. I think we can empower research. There are new tools, sometimes open source. I was quoting the study from Gordon Ramsay at King's College. They developed the Steno tool. Steno tool is here to understand how content can be replicated from websites and how our content travels into website and how you add different versions of the same story. How can you understand narratives, and the story on what happened around the Skripal poisoning is very interesting to understand how many narratives have been used and reused and how they are embedded sometimes in mainstream media. I think that's very interesting to know this. We can empower users, I think, today, we don't talk about this, and I'm sad. Today, we have to have access to internet. We use a window called a browser. A browser is a place when you can embed so many tools, And we have a community which is very wide into developing these new tools. AFP know very well the InVid project, which enables users to Google reverse image, Yandex reverse image, put forensic, find the context of a video. The InVid project is going to become the WeVerify project with adding social graph capacities, deepfake detection capacities. And this tool can be in your browser. So you just have to do click right, Google reverse image, and you can find something. You have many things that can help you to understand what kind of things are going on. And we need to have more action from the browser. I think Google Chrome is late on this. They should have more and more tools that are natively embedded in the browser. And if you do this, you can help people to actually understand what's going on for them. And then we need to also develop new tools, so that we verify, and also to develop new training tools. There is another European project we participate in, is to develop a toolkit for adult learners on disinformation and on fake news. The thing is, and I also want to insist on this, it's very complicated if you don't have right now technological background. The people in society right now that don't have a strong technological background are, let's say, the people that are 50 plus. I don't know if you have relatives or if you are yourself 50 plus, but sometimes they tend to share a lot of disinformation around you through WhatsApp or email chains. A lot. And they go to polling station every time. So this means they have an impact on how the debate is shaped. Mm-hmm. So we need also to be able to do media literacy with these new tools for these people.
I mean, what you're saying, I don't know if most people are familiar with, InVid is an amazing tool. It's very simple to use. I mean, I train a lot of journalists on the tool, but it's nonetheless, as you say, it's requiring a certain level of interest in technology and media literacy that a lot of people will not have. How can we get those tools or make it more transparent to an audience that is not looking for it and that doesn't have that technological knowledge?
We need to push this tool, but right now there is no incentive to do that. So we need to realize that it's urgent to do it, and it's easy to push tools. So we saw, like David Rand yesterday talked about how if you put like a simple pop-up question that ask you for the validity of something, people share much less false information. But Google has absolutely no incentive to do things like that, because that will break the user experience. Facebook, Google don't have incentives to do that. So it has to be someone else who does it, whether it's Mozilla. Mozilla is very interested in working in this kind of field. So we'll see, or whether it's Oxford Internet Institute, who has been really leading in observing what's going on. So we need to work all together as an open source community to create these tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think more than pushing, it's about identifying what personal benefit is there in learning about these tools for maybe a generation that hasn't grown up with technology. Instead of, is there a way in which we can convince them that it's in their benefit to be familiar with these tools? It's not just to shape the narrative in terms of, oh, you're wrecking democracy, or you don't understand these tools, or that you don't have a stake in the future. But how do we shape this? How do we be respectful of their sentiments as well, and to shape it in such a way that it delivers value and benefit to the people we're trying to educate, perhaps, to make them stakeholders as well.
Yeah, and we have a lot of initiatives that are going also on the ground, because we here in Brussels, it's very nice, but we also need to go on the ground. And I think the work of lie detectors, for instance, is very important to this, to go into the schools, to go like where you need to meet people. And that's the thing I do on a personal basis in my family, for instance, like to explain how it works. I think we all need to take the time to take these very simple actions to explain, at least to everyone we know around us, what's going on, and to show what's going on, to understand and to make them understand, yeah, you're seeing this because of this and this and this. And you're seeing this on Google News because, yeah, look at the source. And this is the thing we need to all do together, because if I hear a lot like the civil society, the civil society should do this. The civil society is here. We are civil society. We all are civil society. Yeah. So we need to all do this, and not to wait for the next thing to come. We need to all do this together, and if we don't trust, and I'm going back to this, if we don't trust each other, if we don't collaborate with each other, and I'm putting on both the platforms, because they are open to discussion. We need to bring them on board to have technical solutions which can be embedded in the social context in our societies, because we're not going to, it's useless if we fight without an ending, because we're not going to happen any time and anywhere soon.
And just talking about tools that are very user-friendly that exist right now, I mean, do you have recommendations or suggestions of where we can find list of open source tools or simple tools? I mean, what advice do you give to people?
So we ourselves within the Computational Propaganda Project have developed, one of my colleagues, Mimi Liotsu, she's developed this junk news aggregator tool, which is completely open source. So this works for known sources of junk news that we've classified as propaganda sites in the US context. And using this tool, you can gauge in real time, gauge what engagement some of these stories have received in terms of reactions and likes and shares and so on Facebook. So that's quite a useful tool for journalists and anyone who's interested in the problem of misinformation, disinformation.
How do we access it? Or
so it's completely open source. You just have to go to our website, and if you type the junk news aggregator, it would take you straight to the tool, and and you could just start using it.
And that has a database behind it?
It does, yes. Yeah. So it works only for US news sources, but the plan is to roll it out for other countries as well.
So there are different type of tools. There are tools for the user, so those are always very difficult to push to users, so that's why it's better if it's done by Mozilla or by Google. But there are tools also for legislators to try to understand what's going on, so they can take better legislation that could be done. Like we see the work of Claudio is going to be really helpful to understand what's going on Facebook and what I'm doing on YouTube. So we need different type of tools. And eventually, if Google is still recommending using algorithms that promote pedophile contents, then eventually we need to develop alternatives ourselves to say a recommendation engine that put truth into account. It's possible to do, and here's how we are going to do that.
Also, I think one of the next things that is going to come is that we have a big discussion right now in Europe, also in Canada and Australia, about political advertisement, and the fact that there will be a repository for political advertisement is very interesting, because it means that you can have AI tools just trying to understand what kind of political advertisement has been shared. This is a first good step. I think that the second good step is to have a common repository between the platforms, because if we only have one Facebook, one Google, one Twitter, and we cannot compare anything because this one is giving you the name of the people who buy, the other one gives you an ID which is not the same, you cannot do anything about this. So I think the next part of it is how we are bringing people together to have to design tools that are useful for everyone and not for only the next elections in 2 months, but to be sure, okay, what do we want to do? What do we want to achieve? And I think at the end, we are not afraid of what AI can bring. We are afraid that AI can support the unfairness of the debate. And we need to have fair debates. We need to have debates with arguments. We need to have debates which are rational, and we confront vision. And from then, very often in democracy, we arrive to a compromise, which is never perfect, but it's like this. If AI and algorithm are driving us to have no capacity to debate together or to fight for everything and not to be able to compromise, then they will arrive to more distrust between each of us, and then we will be more and more living in a dystopian world. I don't want this to happen. I think we have time, because it's a challenging time, and we know this is going on, I think. And this is a path we could take, thanks to Charlie Brooker and Black Mirror. We know exactly where we could go. So let's try to take the other path.
Yeah. So we need a shared reality. Right now, we have a fragmented reality with this filter bubble. Last week, Google DeepMind showed that recommendation engines were creating this filter bubble. They could create echo chamber filter bubbles. So it's Google DeepMind who did it. So it's amazing. It's an amazing paper. And so now people can't debate that this is happening. So we need to build this tool to create this shared reality. And it's a lot of work.
And in terms of, I mean, we haven't got much time left, but in terms of government efforts to, I mean, I know there's been a lot of discussion about the negative impacts of fake news laws and things like that. But within them, have you got any examples of positive things that have been, or positive attempts to make things more transparent, particularly AI algorithms in terms of government measures or propositions?
So personally, I haven't studied the problem in great depth, but I know that within the team, there is a view that over-regulation would create as many problems as perhaps under-regulation. So we do want these platforms to be open spaces where people can express their opinions, where there's free and frank debate, and where people who haven't had a platform until now are able to express their views. So it gives them, particularly in countries like India, maybe even among women, who haven't been part of the political discourse traditionally, feel empowered when they can express a view on, say, Facebook or Twitter, or share a YouTube video, and it gives them a sense of, it improves their sense of self-worth and so on. So we do want to provide that kind of positive reinforcement. That might be one positive impact. I think it's bringing more people into, it's extending political participation, access to representation, and so on. So that's possibly one benefit, but there are so many problems. Yeah,
that's what we're here for, to create some.
The only potential good thing I've seen, we've been working a lot with the Belgian expert group last year, and one of the recommendations that came out of the group, which was so close to be adopted by the Belgian government before he felt, was to create a kind of civil society council, saying that at some point it's not up to the government to lead this, because the government cannot lead the search for the truth. That's not possible. But the government has a social responsibility to put people around the table so they can discuss.
Yeah.
And the idea was to create that kind of civil society council with researchers, NGOs, people doing media literacy, journalists, and to grant them with a fund. And this fund was about to be 1.5 million euro, which for Belgium, which was not that bad, to improve media literacy, to improve fact-checking, to improve research, to have discussion with the platforms. And this was very interesting in terms of how we can design a solution which is away from regulation that, as Brett said in the last panel, that is replicated in authoritarian countries. I was just reading BBC this morning, there is now a fake news law in Russia. So, and it looks like some of the laws that we've seen in other countries, and that's very problematic.
Yeah.
And that's why we've been very vocal against the German NetzDG or the French Facebook, because this is not bringing the good solutions forward. The good solution is to give back to civil society the place it deserves into this. It's up to journalists to fact-check things. It's been their job for 500 years. It's up to academics to do research. It's been their job for 2,000 years. So we have this expertise inside the society. We need to put this expertise on board, and we need to give the credibility to protect civil society. Because if we can't protect this asset, then we have nobody to turn on when we have an issue. And that's very dangerous.
So in France, this law that passed that requires platform to give the percentage of the views on content that comes from their recommendation algorithm, search algorithm, etc. So this is like a transparency law, so there is absolutely no need for censorship, but to see what's actually going on. For instance, we were talking about Pizzagate conspiracy theories. Did Pizzagate conspiracy theory was recommended mostly by algorithm or by human? Right now, I don't know. I've seen it recommended so much by algorithms on YouTube that I feel like Pizzagate conspiracy theory might be an AI boosted conspiracy theory. So that's very worrying. And thanks to this law, we will know more. So it's currently being implemented. So I'm really curious.
So promoting those kind of laws, seeking, above all, transparency and
accountability.
And accountability,
Yeah.
how as far as possible.
Yeah, I think there are very good researchers who talk about opening the black box, and making these platforms and companies actually explain why you're seeing the content that you're seeing. Is it because of your preferences? Is it because of your browsing history? Is it because of your demographic profile? And making this data, perhaps sharing this data with researchers and others, would go a long way towards checking some of these effects, maybe, or mitigating some of these effects that we see. That would be a first step, and it would be in the right direction. Yes.
And we need to think also about other platforms, because we're always talking about Google, Facebook, and Twitter, but like Amazon, Netflix, how they're recommending conspiracy books, conspiracy content. I was on Amazon Prime the other day. They have a fight the system category when you have a lot of conspiracy documentaries. So we need to. It's not only about social platforms, about everything around us, how we behave as humans being in the society. I was reading this quote the other day, is you don't do things on internet, you do things. So internet is just another augmented field of what we do, and has much more capacity. So we need to understand exactly also these kind of things.
Yeah. Okay, I think people might be getting hungry. I would love to carry on, maybe have a lunch, but thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much, Keisha, to everyone for being here and sending in questions on the hashtag. And I need to remind you that we have a lunch break, and the next session will begin promptly at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
MP Damien Collins.